Good morning, everybody. Today is Wednesday, June 23rd. You are joining us live. Behind the lights and cameras of the TV show Wake Up, explore your passion to hear the personal successes and real challenges in the pursuit of a dream here in Hollywood. This is Wake Up Radio. I'm your host, Ryan Ray, and joining me live today in the studio is my co-host, Mr. Fuz Edwards. How are you today, Fuz?
I'm great, Ryan. It's good to be here for another episode of this. We want to remind the callers that we're going to be taking your live calls throughout the show. So please give us a call if you have a question or a comment about something that you hear. The number is 646-727-3841.
That's right, 646-727-3841. We'd love to hear from all of you. And thank you so much for those of you who are logged in the chat room. Jesse, Just Blaze, Mama Fuzz, and several hundred more that are just logging in there. Hi, Mom. We love having you online live with us today. Live in the studio is our special guest today, Robert Burgener, spiritual life coach, intuitive life coach. Robert, it's a pleasure to have you here live today.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
It's a real pleasure. Robert, let's start by getting right into your story because you've got a lot of information to share, and I want all the viewers at home to hear your story. How did you get started doing what you do?
Oh, I was born.
That's a good start.
Yeah, good answer.
Actually, a lot of it started off with me just being what I came into this world as. When I was a kid, I used to know things I wasn't supposed to know. Got me into trouble. But I also had an interest in comparative religion and philosophy. I used to sit in church and just sweat profusely listening to the sermons. And to this day, I couldn't tell you why. You know.
Me too. But for other reasons.
Well, no, actually, I did go to a Hellfire and Brimstone church, but that wasn't the reason.
Now, where are you from? Tell everybody where you were born.
I'm actually from the northern edge of the Bible Belt, St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay.
Brought up a Southern Baptist.
Okay.
Haven't been one for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
Basically, as time went along, I just had some issues. Parent died, ended up in a children's home because I made the mistake of listening to a therapist who told me it was okay to tell my parents I was gay, and they didn't take it too well. So, but I'd say the real adventure started in 1981, March 30th, the day Ronald Reagan was shot. About 2 hours beforehand, I signed myself out of class, started walking, and by 6 a.m. on Friday morning, I was in Los Angeles that started the adventure of a lifetime for me.
And now, hold on just a minute, because I think what everyone's probably wondering is, number one, why would you do that? And number two, how the hell did you get to Los Angeles on foot in just a few days?
Let's see, why? To be honest with you, 30 years later, I don't have a clue. I just did it.
Wow.
I wasn't having a good time. My parents had put me into a children's home because I think they were afraid I was going to do something to my stepbrothers. You know, a gay man can't possibly control himself even if he doesn't find his stepbrothers interesting. But that was their issue. I was having some problems there. Things weren't working out particularly great. And I guess I just got frustrated with it. And the funny thing is if you would have asked me to make a decision, I probably would have gone to Florida because I liked Florida. Somehow I went west.
And now, how did you get west? How did that happen?
Well, let's see. Friday, that was a Monday. So Monday about 9 o'clock, I signed myself out of class, saying I was going to see my therapist. I didn't tell him it was 3,000 miles away. Started walking, and about 3 o'clock that afternoon, stopped at a house and asked a lady for a glass of water, and that's when I found out about Ronald Reagan having been shot. And then ended up at a truck stop later that day, got a ride there, and then just rode trucks. Got a ride from outside St. Louis County to Flagstaff, Arizona. Had a very chilly couple of hours waiting for a ride in Flagstaff. Picked up a ride that was going to drop me in Kingman, but we could see a storm coming over the mountains. So I went to Las Vegas, had my first experience in Vegas.
At age
15. Then a couple hours, had some interesting experiences in the Saharan, which is sadly no longer there. But ended up going to out to the freeway later that evening, caught a ride to Mojave, and then a trucker from Mojave who doesn't give hitchhikers rides. The ride said, go into that diner. There are a lot of truckers there. I went in. And who walks in, asks the waitress, do you have a trucker headed to Los Angeles? But I did, and she's like, my truckers don't give people rides.
Yeah.
Sit over there. 5 minutes later, she's, come here. His boss is at another table, so be very quiet. And so he's like, he introduced himself. We chatted for a second. He told me which truck. I went out. I sat in and hid in it till he left. And he gave me a ride to somewhere here in L.A. County. I'm not sure where. I'm thinking somewhere around the Glendale area based on what I remember of what it took to get from there to Hollywood. And by that evening, I was in Hollywood, where I spent the summer of a lifetime living on the streets of Hollywood.
Wow.
And following an inspiration that introduced me to the Hare Krishnas, the Baha'is, the Tibetan Buddhism, meditation, astral projection, the Theosophical Research Society. I mean, it was supposed to be a vacation. I worked.
I mean, I can only imagine as a 15-year-old boy from the Midwest, and having grown up in a very conservative Christian Southern Baptist home, having come through this amazing journey and then being exposed to all of these different things. I mean, talk about some real life experiences under your belt. I mean, those are things that people don't experience in a lifetime, and you had experienced them by age 15.
Oh, definitely. But, I find there are two things about that adventure that I really got out of it. One was, it was my first introduction to what people call the law of attraction.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know it at the time. In fact, when I first realized what it was, I thought I had discovered something. And then I found out all these books.
This is in the 80s.
Yeah, this is 1981, actually.
I mean, and people think the law of attraction just started working about 2 years ago when The Secret came out.
Exactly. I had people come up, oh, have you heard of The Secret? Are you familiar with The Secret? It's like, yeah, I discovered The Secret in the 80s and found out I didn't discover it.
Yeah.
But, the two things I really got out of it was, one, that if I will put my trust in my inspiration and instinct, it will always take care of me if I stay out of my way. And that's one of the things I teach my clients. The other thing was that if I could have known to do that, I could have enjoyed it. I spent a lot of that time being all stressed out. Where am I going to sleep? What am I going to eat? How am I going to take care of myself? But it always took care of itself. I look back on it now, it's like, darn, I wish I could have just relaxed. It would have been much more of an entertaining time. But I still had a lot of fun.
Well, and not to invalidate or demean any of those experiences that you went through, but I think a lot of people, a lot of our listeners sitting at home who have gone to school and who've gotten married and gotten jobs and et cetera, think the same thing. I mean, don't we all do that? If I knew then what I know now, we kind of feel like we would have put a different spin on things. We would have put a different play on things. But do you think we really would?
I think part of it, what I was actually referring to is the fact that I really wish that I had, what I know now is that if I'm truly going to live my life that way, just live it and enjoy the experience. One of the ways I teach it is, this world is a educational virtual reality simulator for the soul.
Okay.
And it's meant to be an entertainment. Even the bad parts are meant to be an entertainment. There's something to learn out of it, but it's not going to kill you. I mean, it may kill the body, but you're not the body. And that's the one thing every religion agrees on. You are an eternal spiritual entity temporarily inhabiting a physical body. Everything else is up for debate. So what I do, the way I live my life, and what I teach my clients is to live your life from that perspective. That doesn't mean go out and do things that are ridiculous and stupid.
Or that will harm you.
Or that will harm you, exactly. But be willing to take the chance and live it from the perspective of, I am experiencing this, I am not this. It's like going to a movie. Some people like slasher movies. They like that adrenaline rush. Okay, well, this is just the next step up.
Well, for a lot of people, this experience is kind of like a slasher movie.
True.
Well, Robert, one of the reasons that I thought that you would be a fantastic guest for the show is because with these kinds of experiences, I mean, you really do learn a lot especially about things like the law of attraction and creating. How did you, how did you survive as a 15-year-old child on the streets of Hollywood? How were you able to, make ends meet and actually...
Well, obviously, it wasn't a palatial existence. I didn't live like a prince or anything. But a couple of things. One was that at that time, fortunately, and I found out later that it was about the last year that was the situation, Hollywood was a different place than it is now. Okay. The street community really was a community. Mm-hmm. People took care of each other. If you needed a place to stay, somebody would let you stay in the hotel room that they got, and then... when you have some night, if you had a hotel room and they needed a place to stay, you'd let them crash on the floor in your hotel room. Mm. Yeah, but it was just a much more community-based environment back then. Mm. I mean, let's be honest. The drugs of choice for the street people were poppers and marijuana. Mm. I mean, cocaine was still God's way of telling you were making too much money. This is pre-DeLorean.
Yeah. Right.
So the world was Hollywood was a different place than it is now. I would never have survived if I had to come to the Hollywood that was even 5 years later when about the time I moved back out here and started spending time back up in Hollywood. When I moved back here permanently in '84. But the other thing was, and it really, like I said, it really was my first experience with the law of attraction, because what I needed always showed up. If I needed a place to stay, it would show up, even if it was from somebody I didn't even know. Mm. If I needed some money for food, somebody would hand me a couple of bucks. If I needed some work or something, because I come from the Midwest, I've got that Midwestern work ethic. I like to earn what I take. I don't take anything from anyone unless I earn it. That's just the way I was brought up. So if I was looking for work, something would show up. Like I'd go down to the Gay Lesbian Center and make myself available for day work. Well, we don't have anything we can give a 15-year-old kid. Yeah. But something would show up.
But this is interesting because The Secret and the law of attraction, I think what people are really trying to do with this is they're not trying to meet their needs. As Americans, I would say that most of us, and I feel like I'm stepping onto a ledge to say this, but I would say that most of us have our basic needs met. I mean, people are trying to create, empires and fulfill some really big desires. How can we... From what you've learned about having your needs met, how can we use those same principles to actually go beyond just meeting our basic needs?
Well, I would say with my particular issue at that time was, and still is, it's one of the areas where I still work on myself with. Teacher, heal thyself. Mm. And that is, first of all, you have to be willing to ask for it. Okay?
Yeah.
And I tend, coming from my background, my mentality, my work ethic and all, I tend to ask for what I need. I ask for enough money to keep my rent paid. I ask for enough money to pay my bills. I don't ask for an extra $5,000 to throw around on a vacation or time off. And I should. I really should. And that's one of the things that I'm working on myself with.
Sure.
But also for me, it's been an issue of... And I find with a lot of my clients, it's a lot of the time an issue of, what am I worth? Well, I'm worth taking care of. And for a long time, I didn't believe I was worth living extravagantly or living the LA dream. I mean, now I live not too far from the beach. I have a lovely apartment. I'm in a neighborhood I adore. I have friends who, I just can't say enough good things about my friends.
What do you have to say, Robert, about feeling deserving?
Most of the time, for me, my personal experience with myself and my clients has always been that deserving really comes down to, one, what is your self-worth? Are you worth it? And if you don't feel you're worth it, find what it is that you are feeling guilty about, and then forgive yourself. Mm-hmm. Because guilt is the place where that seems to live. If we are feeling good about everything that we have done, then we don't have a problem asking for the big pie, the big picture. But if we are feeling guilty, like we have some reason that we don't, you know. And for me, I felt guilty about a lot of things. I had some issues with my mother before she passed away. You know, I had, you know, there's a long story behind that. So there's some other issues that I now understand as an adult. But growing up, until I became aware of those issues, you know, I just thought, you know, I made this poor woman's life miserable periodically.
So a lot of the reasons...
I felt guilty about leaving home. I felt guilty. I grew up in a Southern Baptist home. I felt guilty about being gay, not being a Southern Baptist. You know, all sorts of things. And then I finally realized, you know, why am I feeling guilty? Every time I put the universe to a test to say, is this the right thing? It says yes.
For everything.
Everything.
Because everything is always yes.
Everything's always yes. The universe wants you to be happy. And your natural state is to be happy. You know, Buddha really put it in a nutshell. He said, life is suffering. And it's suffering because we attach ourselves to things. Now, that suffering can be broken, and then he gives his eightfold path of how to break that suffering. And it's all about learning to find spirit within and make that your focus and living for the spirit and not living for these temporary things around you that you think are going to give you happiness.
Well, we've talked about that quite a bit on the show, and so I'm glad to hear you bring that up because, again, a lot of people, they don't know what they want. They think this is what they want. Oh, if I have this new car. Oh, if I have a bigger house. Oh, if this person will love me. So it's all external. And it becomes this list of getting things. I'm going to get this, I'm going to get that. And I think with the law of attraction, some people are excited about that because they foresee that, okay, this has promised me that if I want that thing bad enough, it will come to me.
And that will give me my happiness that I'm seeking so desperately.
Exactly. But so we put the cart before the horse, and they don't realize that, no, it's really got to start within first. You have to be okay with, like you said, settling some of those issues, some of that forgiveness, realizing that there aren't bad things. You and I talk about that quite a bit.
But that's I mean, I have to say it's such a challenge. It's such a daily challenge, and I'll give it a simple example. I after having learned about the secret and the law of attraction, I had some really amazing things that happened. A lot of really amazing things I was able to create. Some big things, actually, if we want to use the word big. But after having learned that I can have anything I want and the universe is conspiring for my happiness and trying to put everything in alignment with what I'm desiring, today I feel like when I don't get the things that I desire, I'm angry at the universe. You know, what the heck? You know, you're supposed to be conspiring for my happiness and I'm not happy, so what's going on?
Well,
it's actually made me maybe more frustrated than happy.
Oh, I run into this all the time. You'd be surprised. I mean, this is why being a life coach, it's one of the things I love about being a life coach because I deal with that issue all the time. And
specifically with people who understand the law of attraction are now frustrated because they're not getting what they want.
Well, part of it's because we have, as human beings, we have a natural tendency, once something works, we think we know it. You know. But then we kind of start skipping steps along the way and then wonder why it doesn't work anymore. Yeah. If you know, it's one thing to know the universe is conspiring to your behalf. It's another thing to put it in the right frame of mind. Don't want things. The universe, for all of its immense power and vast space, is a little dense. The universe understands if you put energy into it, that's what you're going to manifest. The problem is most of us put energy into what we don't want. One of the things I do with my clients on their very first visit, I say, tell me 10 things you want. And almost every time, 6 to 8 of them will be things they don't want. I don't want my job. I don't want money problems. I don't want my fighting with my spouse. We define our lives by the negatives in it. The problem is the universe doesn't understand the word no. In fact, there's been studies that say the human subconscious doesn't understand the word no. Which, you know, so when you put your energy into what you don't want, you end up creating what you don't want because the universe doesn't understand. You're not wanting this. It says, if you're thinking, you know, like Mother Teresa used to say, I will not go to an anti-war rally. A peace rally, I'm there. Because even though it's anti-war, the focus and where the energy is war. So what are you going to create? War. And it's not me making this up. This is just the way the universe works. I'll tell you this. Any teacher in the law of attraction is going to talk to you at some point about negative attachments. Yeah, and those negative attachments are where we start creating what we don't want. The problem with people like you who've had such good success with the law of attraction is you sometimes forget that step and you start focusing on the things you don't want. You fall back into that old habit.
So how do we recondition ourselves? How do we get back in?
You become aware. The first thing...
I'm aware.
He's aware that he's not getting it.
Well, okay, but you're aware you're not getting it, but are you aware of what it is you're thinking and are you aware of what you're putting on that order slip you're sending out to the universe?
I am aware, and I think that makes me even more frustrated.
Well, I would say the next step after that then would be, let's sit down and talk. What I would do with you as a client is we would sit down and we would go through what it is you've been programming. And there's a couple of really easy exercises that we could go through, and I'll lay you odds. In fact, I'd almost make you a cash bet that we'll find a negative attachment in there, or at least one, if not more than one.
Save you the trouble. I'll just give it to you now because we all have those.
Oh, of course we do. There's certain, when you know the laws of the universe and you know how they work, it's like my great-grandfather used to say, never take a bar bet. If a man tells you he's going to take an unopened deck of cards and the Queen of Spades is going to pop up and spit cider in your eye, you'd better be prepared to have cider in your eye.
Nice. I've never heard that before.
I've heard something similar to that, because they're sure of it. That's the reason they're making the bet.
You don't make a bar bet unless you know you are going to win. It's a sucker's bet.
Well, Robert, I want to talk a little bit about your upcoming... You're doing a seminar series right now in Culver City, the 10 Secrets to the Secret.
10 Secrets to the Secret. It's the title of the book I'm getting ready to... I'm finishing up and hoping to release... Ideally by the end of the summer, but I may be moving it up earlier. I'm involved with an event with a previous guest of yours, and I'm going to see if I can get everything done, edited, published, and ready for that event in the end of around the end of July.
Okay, so 10 Secrets to the Secret. It's a catchy title. It's something that really evokes a lot of questions in my mind, and I definitely want to open up to all of our listeners and viewers online. If you have any questions that you would like to ask Robert about the secret, specific things, because Robert's a wealth of knowledge, information here. We're going to definitely take those in a moment. First, though, I wanted to just touch on something that you had told me when we spoke before on the phone. You had said that you are here to be of service, and it's not always what people want, but what they need that you're here to touch on. Let's talk a little bit about that sort of philosophy.
Yeah, that's where I get in trouble with people a lot. I have, like I said earlier, I've had a tendency of knowing things I have no business knowing. I don't call myself a psychic. To me, a psychic is somebody who either has it turned on all the time and can't turn it off, or can control when and what they do. Now, nothing against psychics. I have some friends who are amazing psychics, and I've heard enough from them that I firmly believe in the phenomenon. I'm just not one of them. I call myself an empath, and I call myself an intuitive. I pick up on strong emotions, and I pick up on periodic pieces of information. And I share those with my clients. And when I was a kid, I would share them sometimes at bad times and get myself into a lot of trouble, which is why I took a step back from doing that for a long time. It's not someplace a small child wants to be to find out that he's making enemies and he has no idea because he's just saying something that comes out of the ether to him, and oops, such and such really doesn't appreciate the fact that you just named his mistress. Oops.
Wow.
Things like that. And if you would ask me to describe it, I can't describe it. It comes from someplace I don't understand. And I used to think it was my imagination. I was making stuff up. But the people I would say these things to would come back later and tell me that I was right on the mark.
So you use this skill of yours in your work with what you do with your clients.
Exactly. That's why I call myself an intuitive life coach. I don't practice a specific school of life coaching. I just do what I do naturally, and the title of life coach, as described by the schools that I've talked to and the people who I've dealt with, I'm just a natural life coach. And so I recently started using the term. I've only been using the term for about a year or two, though I've actually been doing it for friends and families and associates all my life.
Well, I know that's something that I find really fascinating and always very helpful. Anytime you can get some insight about yourself or about the projects and issues that you're dealing with. And people don't always want to hear about those, right? They don't always want to know.
It's amazing how much people don't want to hear. I have clients who will come and spend 3 months with me and then hate me because the place where they're really stuck, we finally get to it, I tell them about it, and they don't come back for 6 months. And then I get a phone call going, okay, I got it. You know, I got it, you're right, you know, we'll deal with that. We'll start dealing with that subject. And then once we deal with it, you know, the funny thing is I find the things that people respond the worst to initially, once we get through it, you know, they're relieved.
It's a breakthrough.
Yeah, it's a breakthrough, but it's also, it takes a load off their back.
Yeah.
You know, you're not carrying that around.
Yeah.
Well, Robert, it's been really fascinating learning about your backstory and hearing all about the things that you've been dealing with since a very young age. And again, I'd like to open up to the chat room, and I'd like to open up also to the phone lines if anyone would like to give us a call, 646-727-3841. And again, we are live at ryanray.com/radio. So please log on and send us all of your questions. Robert, we're going to have you back for our second half hour today.
Okay, good.
And
because I've been sitting over here the entire time judging you.
Okay.
And so I'm ready to unload.
Wow, that's a breakthrough in itself. Thanks for sharing that on live TV.
No, you know, you've brought up so many interesting points. So it's I've got a lot of questions for you when we come back for the second half. So
Good.
Excited that you're going to be back.
Good.
Well, I'm perfectly happy to say.
All right, so we will be back here in just a moment after this break, and here with WakeUp Radio. Don't go away.
It is about balancing our choices between the gray of the concrete jungle and the stunning beauty of the real one. Between a stoic facade of granite and the fury of the canyon. Between deafness and the presence of breathtaking music. Between blindness and blinding beauty. It's why there's EarthShare, the simple way to find balance. EarthShare is the workplace giving program bringing the leading environmental groups under one umbrella. Support EarthShare, support them all. EarthShare. Please ask your employer about workplace giving. To learn more, please visit our website. There is really only one boy. One girl. One tree. One forest. One deep, dancing ocean. One mountain calling. One handful of sand through our fingers. One endless sky overhead. And one simple way to care for it all. Please visit earthshare.org and learn how the world's leading environmental groups are working together under one name, EarthShare. One environment, one simple way to care for it.
And we are back here live with Robert Burgener in the studio, my co-host Fuz here for Wake Up Radio. It's been an interesting first half hour. We've been talking a little bit about your life story, your background. You're an intuitive life coach. You touch on a lot of spiritual topics, and you're preparing your next book, 10 Secrets to the Secret. And we're excited to talk about this because I know that so many people have been excited about the secret. They've used the secret to change their lives and create a lot of things that they never thought they could. But there are a lot of people who haven't been able to have the same success with that consistently. So, top secret. What's the top secret that you can start us off with here? What is one of the biggest secrets to the secret that we should know about? And I don't want you to have to give away all the content of your book.
No.
Let's just do all 10 right here now. I'll save you the trouble. No need to write anything.
Okay, well, there goes the book and the seminar series I was thinking about giving for the next 25 years. I'll just give it all away right now.
In 30 minutes. Ready, go.
Okay, biggest secret. I would say the one that I run into the most often with the largest number of clients would be... And I'm suddenly drawing a complete blank. I would say, okay, the first one would be that we are truly the children of God. And now, this is both a positive and a negative, as all things are in our reality. It's a positive because it means we are part and parcel of the creative force that brought this universe. Call it the God, the goddess, the
universe,
whatever you want to call it. You know, that's one of the things I like about 20 years of comparative religion. I have lots of vocabulary, so I can talk. And I do this with my clients, especially when we start dealing with the spiritual aspects of things, for those who want it. I can talk to them in the vocabulary they already speak.
And I think it's really important because Fuz and I, we've had this talk many times about semantics, and people get immediately turned off if they hear the G word.
Oh, yeah. The big G
scary.
word. The big G word.
Don't even mention the J word.
Or they get extremely turned on. Like, you know, every single thing has to do with God, this one entity, this... You know, I think the term that's always used is this Charlton Heston-like white-haired figure. You know,
I hate that image of God. I really do.
Because again, it depends on where you are in your development. And Ryan and I were having this conversation just this morning that there's so much attached to that word. You either are brought up and your focus is on that, or you do kind of like where I did a couple of years, and there's that backlash of where you won't have anything to do with it because it seems to be the cause of so many problems. Then you come back around and you start trying to reconcile that, and we were cracking up, you know, with you talking about this vocabulary and us talking about semantics, about where I'm pretty much okay talking about anything spiritual, talking about miracles, talking about whatever, but the moment someone says God, okay, well, I gotta go, because again, then I start thinking back to all of the negative things and all the harm that I've seen,
the guilt
with,
and the judgment and all of that.
Exactly, and I'm a very spiritual person, and I come from a family that was raised in church and etc. But you put that word on it, and I shut down.
Oh, I understand. I run into that a lot.
So don't use that word with me.
Okay. Do you have a particular name you'd prefer?
How about Sal? Can we call it Sal?
I usually use Bob, but Sal will work. Okay.
A little Latin flair today.
There's a little Sal. Okay. So when we're talking about Sal, well, one of the things about Sal that I disagree with my upbringing, my Southern Baptist, is I don't believe, I understand, you know, Hinduism talks about all these different ways of relating to God. There's God the Father, which is the one that in the Western world we spend so much time with.
Right.
But in Hinduism they talk about, and I just absolutely adore it, you know, relating to Sal as a friend, as a lover, as a mother, as a compassionate entity. I think there's a list of like 7 different relationships to that entity. And, you know, I had father issues. My father and I, until recently, did not get along. We were oil and vinegar. And so that's probably why I always had such a hard time with the father figure for God.
That's a good point. That's an interesting point.
Yeah.
You know, to me, God, I've always related to God as a friend. You know, Sal is my best friend. You know, when I have a good day, I make a point of thanking Sal. Maybe he didn't do anything to do it, but it's just developing that attitude of gratitude that you hear people talk about. Get into the habit of saying what you're happy for. We like we talked about earlier, we so often talk about what we don't want, what we're not happy with, and we define our world that way. So start getting into the habit of defining your world by what it is you do have, what you are glad for, what you find to be a blessing in your life. If you spend your time in that perspective, even if you do nothing else with the law of attraction, I can guarantee the happiness factor in your life is not going to go up by a point or two. It's going to skyrocket.
I mean, and that's easy to do when you're feeling good and you're having a good day. But, when there's traffic and you're late for work and lady cuts you off, you just want to shoot somebody sometimes.
I used to be a limo driver in L.A. Okay.
Right. You have a second attention.
Yeah, I know the L.A. freeway systems and the way people drive in this city. One of the things you got to do is, you have that initial flare, but part of that's habit.
Right.
You have developed a habit. You've developed a set of pathways in the neurons in your brain that say, if this action happens,
this is my reaction.
This is my reaction, my response. Okay? Now, for all of the grief my friends give the Scientologists, one of my favorite things about the Church of Scientology is what they call clearing. And what clearing is where you sit down and you talk about something that's happened and what your reaction was. And you start working your way back to find out where that reaction got programmed. And you can work yourself to the point where you are clear of it. And so you stop living as what they call a reactive individual and you start living as a responding individual. Something happens, I have this initial response, oh, wait a minute, is that really what I want to do? And you can step into that space and make the decision how you really want to act, which is really great when you're someone like me, because every once in a while my temper can come out, and when I was a kid it used to get me into a lot of trouble.
Right.
I was very frustrated in a lot of ways. But now as an adult I can take a step back. When somebody hits one of my buttons, I can start to respond, but then I can say, wait a minute, slow down, and I can insert myself in that space because I've developed that habit. I've broken that neuro pathway in my brain.
Right. Well, I think the interesting thing, and you touched upon this on the first half of the show, is that when we start thinking about what we want, in doing that, we're focusing on what we don't want. And I think that goes with changing habits as well. We could be going to a family gathering. I'm just going to use this as an example because we brought up family issues. We could be going to a family gathering, and there may be a particular family member that we're having conflict with, or that we just don't have that relationship that we want. And so we tell ourselves, okay, I'm not going to let that person get to me. I'm not going to let that person get to me. I'm not going to let them get to me. And like you said, what we're concentrating on is what we don't want. It's still coming from a negative place, and we're still churning a little bit of that, expecting it to happen, rather than just saying, man, you know what, I'm going to go to this family gathering and I'm going to have a freaking awesome time. I'm going to love everybody there.
Great point.
Yeah, so what's going to happen with Uncle Ed?
He's going to get to you.
He's going to get you because you have put out into the universe, even though you're saying, I don't want to have this problem, you're focusing on the problem.
You're anticipating.
Yeah. You're creating a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, exactly. I'm going to go have a really good time. And if you have a problem with Uncle Ed, for example,
sure,
just pull a name out of the hat.
Sure.
Fine. You sit down and you just put in your mind something you can appreciate about Uncle Ed. Anything. Maybe he's got a funny way of talking. Maybe he has, maybe he wears clothes that even RuPaul on her worst day wouldn't wear. Whatever. Find something that you can appreciate. Find something that you can find enjoyable about that person. And that's your first step. Because first you've got to break the habit of, I want to resist this. Because what's that old expression? What you resist persists.
Well, Robert, we have some questions in the chat room, and I'd like to touch on these. First one that pops up here is, what's the best way to identify what obstacles we have in our life that we must overcome?
Okay.
Because I think sometimes we find ourselves blocked and unable to, we're not reaching our goals, but we don't really know why. And I would have to say I think that's coming because there's some sort of a block, there's some sort of an obstacle. How do you really hone in on that?
Well, the first thing I would say is, Okay, well, just do a little. There's a little exercise that I teach my clients, and it's a part of my daily practice. I do it all the time, especially when I catch myself responding to things, or when I catch myself in a dark place. Sit down and think about it, and start figuring out where the darkness is. When you get a moment, sit down. You're having a situation with someone at work, and for whatever reason you can't take a step out of it. Mm-hmm. Sit down and think about, what is it that I'm actually having a problem with? What am I responding to? Because really, the first step in all of this is becoming aware. Because you're not going to find the answer out there. The answer is never out there. The answer is always within. So if you look within and see what it is that you are, where you're giving them the energy to affect you, because people can only affect you as far as you give them the energy to. If you can look inside and see where that what that response is, what it is you're responding to, then you can start working on changing how you respond to it. And the first step really is awareness of it. We were talking about negative attachments, people programming things and not getting things. Same exercise works there. With that, take the idea of what you're programming. I have a client of mine who wanted a new job, and it just wasn't happening. So I told him, I go, take the idea of, I want a new job, however, that's how he phrased it, and I said, hold it for a minute. Don't think about anything else. Just keep thinking, I want a new job, I want a new job, I want a new job. Let him do that for about a minute or two. What's your emotional state? Because your emotions really are your guidance to how you relate to things.
Good. Mm-hmm.
If the emotional state, as one of my teachers used to say, is anything short of warm and fuzzy, there's a negative attachment in there. And in his case, what it was he was thinking and saying, I want a new job. But what he was really thinking and what he was actually focusing on was, I want away from my current job that I hate.
Wow, I think that's really powerful. I want to just re-emphasize this because we don't even realize we're doing that.
Right. We think that we're saying it. We think that we're putting out there, and so therefore we think we're doing the next step. But what we're still feeling is all of that attachment to that don't part of it.
That's one of the really big problems with language. Problem is, I'm sure you've played post office when you were a kid. Well, language is a way of communicating. Unfortunately, it suffers from certain problems. One of its big problems is how I associate a word may be different from how you associate it, which will be different. Which may be different from how you associate it. So it's like playing post office. I whisper in your ear, "Sally's pretty," and by the time it makes it around the room, somehow Betty has turned into an iguana.
Right.
And it's just because I say this, you interpret it one way and pass it on. They interpret it another way, they pass it on. And by the time it comes all the way around, the original intent is nowhere in the sentence.
Well, it brings to mind, I mean, we've already touched upon the G word. For some people that when you talk God, there's a certain way and certain things that you have to say. And then for some, there are people that react to it negatively because of the conditioning. And it made me think of prayer. I read something somewhere the other day where it talks about how generally people go to prayer in a moment of crises. Like they go right to it. But you use the word meditation and all of a sudden, oh, well, that's voodoo. That's weird. That's something that, no, I can't do that. Call it prayer, they're fine. Call it meditation, and no, that has something to do with something entirely different. Whereas, if we were kind of meditating, or if we were praying, if that's the word you want to use, during the good moments as well, then maybe we would see more of that instead of saving it as that crisis point.
See, I'm just the opposite. I don't care for the word prayer, but the reason I don't care for the word prayer is not because I think it's a bad thing. I mean, to me, prayer and meditation basically are the same thing.
Right.
But because of the way I was brought up, prayer to me is when I negotiate with God. That's when I go, God, if you'll give me X, I will do Y, Z, Z1, Z2, and Z3.
Knowing good and well you're not going to do X, Y, and Z as soon as you get it. I mean...
Exactly. But for me, personally, meditation
Just kidding, God. Did I say I would feed the homeless?
I love that line.
Just joking.
I don't know if you remember that TV show, Joan of Arcadia. But I always loved that scene in the first episode when God says to Joan, he goes, well, do this for me, and I'll forget that promise you made and never kept. What's that? That if your brother survived, you'd go to church, you'd do your homework, and be good to your children, and be good to your mom, or whatever.
Right.
So the way I look at it, and this is just personal, deal with it, associate it however you associate it. But to me, prayer has become, over the years, my negotiating with God or my attempts at dealing with God. For me, meditation is when I shut up and listen for a response. That sounds like it's
more powerful.
Yeah.
And that's just the way I associate it.
Because we're too busy.
I love that. I have a very dear friend who that's kind of because when I was first learning about this or trying to to meditate and whatever, he explained it to me that prayer is when you ask for something. Meditation is when you listen for the answer. And how many times have we done that?
Yeah.
We're like, oh God, why me? Why don't you? Why yada 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 yada? But then are completely oblivious to the answer that's being because we're still focused on the drama.
All right. Well, the G word has come up a lot today, and I want to actually touch on one other question I think is really important here from the chat room, and it is how important is our recognition of a universal power in our lives in order to achieve what we want? What if someone's an atheist?
Okay.
What does that do?
I abide by something from the Indian Upanishads, which says there are 8.4 million forms of life. 400,000 of them are human beings at different levels of their spiritual evolution. Okay. There are I personally believe in an ultimate creator beyond this that is singular and is the source of all of it. That's what I believe. You don't have to believe that. You don't have to believe in a God. What you have to believe in, though, is in yourself, that you're worthy, and give yourself permission to try. I love skeptics. I love it when I get a client. I've had clients who are complete atheists, believe in no God, no higher power of any kind. They are what they see. They don't believe the law of attraction is anything but a really nice idea taught to people who want to make a buck. Fine. If they can be a true, honest skeptic about it, which means I don't necessarily believe it, but I'm going to give it a good faith try. And if they're willing to learn about it, pursue it, and truly give it an honest try, they consistently come around.
Well, I think that quantum physics and science actually lends itself to answer a lot of our questions. I mean, if you think about energy, the energy that quantum physics says that we were all made up of. I mean, my personal belief has always been that this G word, God, is this is somehow part of all of this energy, or it is the empty space in between the different molecules and atoms that make up our universe. I mean, that unifying force that is omnipresent and is not subject to time or physical laws. What is that? I don't know. It's a vacuum, but it's you could think of God however you want.
I think one of my favorite expressions of God in creation is, well, there's two of them for different aspects. One is that the universe is a movie being projected upon a screen.
Oh, this is cool. Yeah.
God is the screen upon which it's projected. When you go to a movie theater, you never think about the screen you're watching. You just think about the pictures that are being shown on that screen.
Yeah.
And I like that way of kind of, even though it's not obvious, it's still there. Mm-hmm. The other one, as far as, really deals more with why creation. What's the point? I really like the idea that you get from, I believe it's Donald Walsh in his Conversation with God series.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he says that God knew himself to be the totality of everything that is, was, or ever would be. But knowing something and experiencing it are two totally different things.
Mm-hmm.
Creation is God having that experience, and we are all part of that.
Yeah.
But the other aspect I add to that is, because God is a perfect being, he can't create anything but perfection. So that's one of the reasons why I don't believe in guilt, and that's why I believe in forgiving myself when I screw up. And trust me, there have been some times in my life where I've really screwed up.
No. Well, I need to take that cue, because earlier or at the end of the first half hour, I made the joke that I was sitting over here judging you.
Mm-hmm.
And what I was really doing is, as you were telling my story, my head was spinning, because I was thinking, wow, what an incredible story. Okay, wait a minute. Our viewers, or our listeners, I'm expecting them to listen to this guy who just walked out of school and started walking across and then lived on the streets in L.A. and blah, 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 and that doesn't seem like a very credible person. And then I'm like, well, wait a minute. How many biographies, how many people have we read about and we kind of revere who have gone through some huge crisis experience, and we do appreciate them for having that experience for us. I think a lot of times in our narrow-minded, in our small view, we start judging people because we're like, well, I don't want to do that. Well, I shouldn't have to go through that. I'm not going to have anything to do with that. Well, guess what? You don't have to, because this gentleman right here did. And through that, you gained your experience and you gained your learning and all of that. I was sitting here, and I'm rambling just for a moment, because, again, so much of this was coming up for me in the first half hour that I was thinking, man, at 15, you did all this stuff. That's crazy. Why would anyone just sign themselves out of school and start walking across America? That's stupid, and I'm not listening to this guy. He's a nutbag. And then, well, and again, and I'm playing with this a little bit, because I didn't sincerely have those thoughts. Again, I was trying to think of myself as I would have been. That would have been a very narrow view that I would have taken just several years ago. But then I also think back to, what about all those high schoolers that lied about their age and enlisted in World War II? And now we think they're heroes. They wanted to go shoot people. They wanted to go be in a war. They wanted, and we revere them. They're heroes, and you wouldn't dare say anything blasphemous or negative about any of those people. And yet that's just as crazy, because I think that's part of their experience. So I just wanted to take a moment to kind of explain where that came from at the end of the last half hour, because, again, what you were saying to me, I was so many contradictions between what I know now and how I would have viewed you, or how maybe someone who's just coming across our show right now, or just finding us on the internet, might be viewing you. And I was trying to reconcile those things within the last 5 minutes of our show.
And I appreciate that, and I apologize because I didn't give you the opportunity to do that.
No. I wouldn't have been able to. I don't think I would have been able to vocalize it, because, again, the wheels were still turning and I was still listening.
Well, just to address that real quickly, there are those of us who live what I call reasonable lives. We live within the paradigm that we're brought up in. Let's be honest, the educational system isn't about creating masters of the universe. It's about creating cogs for this machine that we call society. Yes. And there's nothing wrong with that. Don't get me wrong. I could not and have not been able to live within that machine. And it has given me an experience of the universe that has taken me places and introduced me to things that, sitting at home on the outskirts of St. Louis, I never would have had happen.
Right. Absolutely.
And now I'm not going to claim that everything I've done I'm thrilled to death about. But I'm not ashamed of anything, because every single action was a learning experience.
Absolutely.
Which makes it of value.
Absolutely.
And I teach that to my clients, whatever happens, no matter how, and that's how I teach people to forgive themselves. Learn whatever it is you need to learn from that experience. If you can learn it, you have taken value, and no matter how bad it seemed, it now becomes a positive, because you've gotten something out of it.
Absolutely.
And that's what those experiences are about. getting something out of it, learning whatever it is in there, because nothing happens in your life by accident. Everything has a cause.
Yes. I totally agree that. And I think to go back to something that Ryan brought up a little bit ago, where we get frustrated when we don't see the law of attraction or our prayers being answered or whatever we're focusing on immediately, I also feel that sometimes we're living in the residual. We want it instantaneously, and we kind of forget, well, no, there were those times when we weren't really in the zone. We weren't really aligned with who we're supposed to be and all of that. And I feel like sometimes there's a little bit of that residual that you got to have faith, and you still got to plug along until you're reaping all
Some
of
of us
stuff.
want to go on the Monopoly board from Go to Boardwalk without passing
Absolutely.
jail and Indiana Place and the electric company.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but sometimes to get to that place where we want, like for me, with my teaching, and I'm entering into a new phase of my life. I have tried to do what I do and live the reasonable life for a long time. Now, there's been a certain amount of success in that, but I've realized that I just can't do it anymore. My last job, I love the people I worked with. They were great, and I would invite any of them over at any time. Would I ever go back to the job? Not if you paid me the Irish lottery.
Right.
Just because I can't do that anymore. So
Well, I
now
think-
I'm spending my life doing things, what we're talking about here.
I think so many people would identify with what you've said about being cogs in a machine and not being able to live that life of it's almost a lie, actually, to some degree.
Living in expectation.
And we're wrapping up here. We're just at the end of our show. I want to mention one quick thing that you mentioned to me before. You said a small child gets up as early as possible and doesn't want to go to bed at the end of the day. And I think that if we could all just remember that feeling of when you were a little kid,
when it was new, when life was a wonder. If those of us who have kids, and I'm not one of them, the universe has been spared me spawning so far. But when we were kids, we got up at the crack of dawn.
that's right.
Our parents had to fight to get us into bed.
Well, Robert,
Yeah,
listen,
sorry.
we are out of time.
Okay.
Make sure you check out spiritgeek.com or spiritgeek.blogspot.com. You're doing your seminars where?
It's a coffee house called The Spot on Mondays from about 3 to 4 o'clock.
In Culver City.
In Culver City.
Robert,
Oregon.
thank you so much for being here. And we look forward to having you back.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure.
We're here every Wednesday, 11 a.m. Pacific time for Blog Talk for Ryan. What the heck is this place called? Wake Up Radio with Ryan Ray and Fuz. My co-host Fuz.
Have a great week, everyone.
Bye-bye, guys.
That was another half hour.